Support for today's episode comes from the We Vibe Wand. All right, if you want We Vibe's intense twist on a classic wand vibrator, then you want to check this out. Their cordless model is ultra powerful yet quiet and silky soft. It comes with attachments, or you don't need attachments. Use it in the bed, use it in the bath, whatever. The We Vibe Wand is waterproof, rechargeable, and ready to go. And for our Boonie Breakdown listenership, you can get your We Vibe Wand at a special price only for Boonie Breakdown listeners. So click the link in the show notes or on thebooниebreakdown.com. Hey y'all, it's your girl Boonie, and you're listening to the Boonie Breakdown podcast, your source for all things responsible and ratchet. All right, so welcome to this week's episode. We have a guest here this week, and I would like to introduce you all to Dr. Clarissa Francis. She has created a movement, and her mission in her work is to celebrate bodily autonomy, sexual agency, and pleasure for Black women and marginalized groups. We have a really, really dope conversation about her real hot girl movement. My body, my choice, my pleasure. We talk about the politics around Black bodies and what does sexual liberation look like for Black women. So stick around for the conversation. I think some of what we discussed, we recorded this discussion a few weeks ago, but given what's happening in the news, I do feel like this conversation is timely when these things arise, especially for Black women. So stick around for the conversation. I'm going to do something different this week. I'm not per se doing a pick of the week that is, go watch a TV show. But I kind of just want to encourage people, especially with the news that came out with Diddy and Cassie this week. It's always a little disheartening when these conversations come out because people treat abuse and intimate partner violence very black and white. And I don't feel like that subject is very black and white. There is a lot of things that go into abuse, and Cassie was very brave, in my opinion, to stand up to someone who was wealthier, older than her abuser, and she did it publicly. It made quite a splash, right? And then because both parties settled, there's been some discourse around that I think makes these conversations so hard to watch and ingest sometimes publicly. And so I say this to everyone. One, I commend any survivor of any type of domestic violence or intimate partner violence or abuse, who's able to share their truth, confront their abuser, and find peace and space to move forward. And I just want to drop this little nugget, and then we're going to move on because I don't myself have the capacity to do this conversation. And we did do an episode around domestic and intimate partner violence. But I just want to make the point that you always hear, why don't people come forward immediately? And I think that's a very complex thing. But one of the things I just want to point out that sometimes in instances of abuse, domestic violence, when you come forward immediately, that oftentimes increases the severity of the abuse in that relationship. There are oftentimes conflicting feelings around someone who is abused about sending their abuser to jail, right? Because abuse is not just physical. There is an emotional, there's a mental control there as well. And so sometimes it may take people years to come forward once they've processed their abuse, and they've had a chance to heal from it. And so I don't think we ever should question why someone took so long to come forward. A lot of times when you do come forward, that's when you hear, I tried to leave and you were harmed. I tried to leave and he came to my job, or they came to my job and did whatever. And so sometimes you really do have to make a plan to escape heal, and then you can deal with that. And so I think we need to, I just want to drop that nugget out there for those. I'm hopeful that nobody who is listening to the podcast, y'all just shaking y'all head in agreement, but not so much of a space that you feel that you need to question why any victim did anything on any timeline that they felt necessary. And so that is it for my soapbox moment of this episode. A little deviation from the pick of the week, but something that was on my heart and I wanted to say.
Housekeeping. Housekeeping.
Come back later, please.
Housekeeping.
Not now.
All right, housekeeping. So we're going to do a little feedback from last week's episode. I enjoyed all of the feedback, all of the commentary. It was very interesting to me because it was kind of blasphemous for Sheikah and I to speak out against Love Jones. So if you did not listen to last week's episode, I encourage you to run it back. We got this note. This is a great episode. I think Boomerang has got to be the next for your segment. I just recently rewatched it and I noticed it hits different a few years later for some different reasons. But again, great episode. So again, check back Love Jones Nope with the homie Sheikah for last week's episode. Also, just want to let everyone know, since it's Black Friday, we're going to do we're doing a promo code on the merch. So if you would like to get some new Boonie Breakdown merch things, you can use the code Black Friday 23, Black Friday 23, and you can save 30% off all orders over $40. Okay. So that is probably the highest coupon code I ever do. And go ahead, get your things, get your sweatshirts, your journals, all that fun stuff. Also, if you're interested, we do have a book club. Our book club is reading Confessions of a Video Vixen by Corinne Steffens. That is only for Patreon members. So if you're interested in joining the Patreon group, you can head on over to patreon.com/the Boonie Breakdown. You can follow there. And if this is your first time listening, go ahead and just open your phone, go to Instagram or TikTok or Facebook, and you can find us at the Boonie Breakdown. If you're still over there on Twitter, yes, I still call it Twitter. If you're still there, you can just follow us at Boonie Breakdown. All right. Your first time listening, go ahead and just hit follow, subscribe in your podcast app. We appreciate it so much. So that is it for me. So let's get ready to break it down. Hey guys, it's your girl Boonie, and I'm excited to welcome Dr. Clarissa Francis to the Boonie Breakdown. Welcome.
Oh, thank you.
The real hot girl doc. So before we get started, I always like to give people a chance to say, how did they find themselves in this space? Like, what along your life path said, this is the role for me, this is what I want to be doing?
Mm-hmm. So this is the most common question when I tell people what I do and who I am. It's like, how did you get here? And I'll talk more about it later, but which I put in my book, Freak Like Me, Becoming a Real Hot Girl Doc. So it all started when it started with myself. It was personal, of having questions. So really young. So with my cycle, menstruation, I had questions. I was given a book, How Does the Body Work? I studied it. I studied the section about reproductive health. And then later, like high school, starting to have experiences, and other people around me are having experiences around sex and reproductive health and our activities. And so we had questions. We didn't have really good, efficient or detailed sex education. It was very limited. We had that one day, in health class. Middle school, high school, the same. I remember signing a promise that I would not have sex till marriage.
Oh, you took one of those.
Yeah. It's like, hey.
Yeah, I never took a pledge, but I've always heard about people who had to sign those like abstinence pledges. Kind of crazy.
The real hot girl died, but really being who I needed when I was younger. And so grew up in the church, preacher's kid, um, limited information there also around, a lot of shame and restriction around the body, sex, sexuality, pleasure, especially when it came to women and girls.
For
And so
sure.
that didn't sit right with me. And so later becoming a healthcare educator in undergrad at Bowling Green State University. And I really took an interest in sexual health and mental wellness. I already said that, well, and then the part after after an experience, um, I really became interested in sex education, about prevention and like sharing information. And I wanted to share it in a way where it was non-judgmental
Okay.
and it's informative. Like, hey, you know, sex is great. It can be great. It can be pleasurable. And
And look, I'm like, and
and these are ways if you want to prevent, because we call it safer sex, and not just safe sex. Like, if you want to prevent, we talk about STIs, unplanned pregnancies, or and then the list goes on. We don't usually always talk about, especially when it comes to like emotions and
yeah.
life. And so I wanted to be that for other young Black people. Something that started personal. I It became my work. I'm
Yeah.
really passionate about it. And so, and now I'm in a space where I want to help others who are in this work, where they're getting the information out, about what they're offering, their services, the resources, and being that support. Because being a person of color, and specifically a Black woman, in this work, it has its challenges.
But yeah, I want to dive into, you just said a lot. So I
I
want to kind
know.
of break this up and kind of dive a little deeper into some of this. But I think one of the first things you said that stood out, um a lot of the shame that is developed as we're youth around our bodies, I'm talking particularly Black women, um, how
Mhm.
much that is influenced by everything around us, right? So you have the older generations, you mentioned religion, you have
Mhm.
friends growing up,
Mhm.
just being a teenager, being an adolescent, and growing up in
Mhm.
figuring out life, figuring out who you are, and this all
Mhm.
shapes and molds,
Mhm.
right? All of your
Mhm.
thoughts around your body, your
Mhm.
developing sexuality. Um, how do you help when you're teaching, right, to
Mhm.
unlearn some of these things that you ingest? Because you mentioned healing, and I
Mhm.
know
Mhm.
in
Mhm.
my own healing journey, some of that has had to been unlearned, but I'm an adult,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So, what are some like two things that you would recommend to somebody to unlearn some of those things?
So that is a big part of that's a big part of the work that I do around healing, because I um, advocate releasing shit. And that's a acronym for shame, fear of harm and judgment, internalized oppression, and trauma bonds. We have these different experiences. We receive these messages, like I mentioned, of some of the messages I received were negative or limited, which many others share that also. Um, and then you have your own experiences. And then also we have our collective experiences, the history, of our people. And so the first thing I say is to check those messages, basically checking your baggage, questioning those messages that you received, around your body, sex, sexuality, relationships, love, intimacy, pleasure. Where did they come from? Like, first thinking about what's your thoughts about those things, and then thinking like, where did they come from? Experiences that you've had? Did it come from just passed on? This is what you heard.
Yeah.
And so that's a big piece of it, of checking it, naming that, naming of the thing. And then with healing, uh, through the way my approach to healing is releasing. And that's where that shame, that fear of harm, judgment, internalized oppression. And so really finding what works for you to release that shit. and so
Yeah.
that can be, and so that can be, therapy in different forms, whether talking to someone, a mental health counselor or a therapist or clinician. It can be a spiritual advisor. It can be, then you have somatic and which body workers, energy workers, tantra healers, which is all therapy. It's all about helping you really just help finding those who have done some type of training or have some type of experience, or knowledge, or the tools to be able to assist you, because it's your journey. So you got to do the work, but it's helpful to have someone to assist you. So whether it's a coach, there's coaches also, and to help you along this journey. Also, your support system is important. Your partner
For
is
sure.
important. So all of those things at the same time. And figure out what works for you. Plant medicine is something that I also, it is something so these are all things that I speak on, even in my book and Freak Like Me, what was beneficial. Like it was the works for me. I needed the works.
You did the whole package.
Because it was so many, it was multi-layered, because it's like not only healing my own shit, but I'm also helping others to heal theirs. And so in order to be authentic in what I do, it's like I need to do the work. We don't have many models of sexually liberated Black women who, who we are allowing ourselves and younger women to be like, yeah, that's cool. I want to be like that. That's something I can do, actually. And so I was like, well, I guess I was like, well, let's see, like, having more experiences so we can have more examples and lessons learned. So I share a lot of lessons learned, you know, um, about my experience and others, in order to hopefully to assist others in their journeys.
So what does a sexually liberated Black woman look like?
Okay, so I define sexual liberation as the pursuit of bodily autonomy. So that's control of the body, and sexual freedom, or freedom of sexual expression. And so that is the ability to say yes or no to what you want sexually and having it honored. So consent is also a part of that conversation, and pleasure. And pleasure is um, self-define what feels good to you. And it's, while in this conversation we often, it's related to sexual pleasure, but this could be something that I encourage in general, because I'm a advocate of joy and frolicking. And so I encourage people to normalize, frolicking and doing things that bring you joy, is because this is also pleasure. This could also be what brings you to your pleasure, especially if you experience trauma, loss, or just had different experiences, and just being, if you are a part of a marginalized group, it's just a lot that comes with that. And so it's a radical act to tap into pleasure.
And I think too, like, it gets hijacked a little bit in conversation, right? Like, people are like, sexually liberated women, like, they just want to automatically put the hoe stamp, right? She a hoe.
Yeah.
That's what it means. She just want to be out here and she want to be fucking everybody. And I liked your definition of like autonomy of my body and my choice. So it could look like that for somebody.
It could be somebody who's a sexually liberated person. It's multifaceted. It could be a married woman, like with twerking, or like, just
Let's
how
get
you
to it.
move your
Even with
body.
twerking, yeah.
Yes, it could be somebody who's celibate. So it's like, it's definitely not just like people. You're right about how people, they hear that because it's not common. It's not
Yeah.
common that we're talking about this openly, because this has been around, like especially in music, and in film, we've seen this, and in literature, but in such a public and explicit way. Oh, excuse me. And so, um, a part of the work is, like, I encourage those who just tap into whatever feels good to you, and that's something that I do.
That's simple as hell. Tap into whatever
So
feels good to
what
you,
feels
right?
good, and if you don't know, explore. That is a challenge, to yourself, is to explore what feels good to you, so you could communicate that with others and advocate for yourself.
Feels good to you. You don't know, explore and advocate. I think that is something the skill of advocating for yourself, no matter what facet, when it comes to pleasure, health,
Yeah,
workplace,
yeah,
wherever,
yeah,
it's such a learned behavior and a learned skill, even to show up for yourself and put
yeah,
you first, because we're often taught, nope, you
yep,
gotta you gotta do this first, put your kids
yeah,
first, your husband first, all these things first. So
yeah.
no, I loved that breakdown. I'm looking at your sweatshirt,
Oh yeah.
the
So
real hot girl movement. My
yes,
body, my choice, my pleasure. I liked
yes,
that mantra because it's very simplified, right? Even in the goal of being a sexually liberated woman,
yes,
my body, my choice, my pleasure. So
yes,
let's talk about this real hot girl movement. And you already mentioned twerking. How
yes.
did it? Is this just like, as you've done your healing work and you've moved into this space with all of your knowledge and education, um, has this become like your focus in your work when you work with and educating? Like, let's
Hmm.
focus on these three things: my autonomy, my choice, my body, and your pleasure. Is that,
So, oh, is that my?
yeah, I was like, is that like the focus of your work when
It
you
is.
educate?
It is. And so it wasn't until my actually, so it wasn't until probably my dissertation, which was on Real Hot Girl Movement, um, pleasure activism, in Atlanta, Georgia, is what I specifically looked at. And that's looking at Black women's sexual liberation, the movement towards Black women's sexual liberation. But also, even with my line, because that is something that exactly what I wanted to do, is simplify what I'm talking about, because this is not just for the scholars or the clinicians, or those who may look into the literature or maybe read my dissertation. I mean, I'm not reading it, but it's like, but it will be coming soon in a book. So that something to check out. But I do touch on it in different writings and when I speak, and in the book I mentioned different things, but I wanted it to be relatable and to everyone, who I'm speaking of, and that's Black women and those who support us. So, support our pleasure, support our the protection of us and our rights and everything. And so it started out, as I mentioned, I started in HIV/AIDS awareness,
Okay.
and then even in that, in sex education, sexual health. So these topics would come up about bodily autonomy and sexual freedom, consent, and pleasure. But I wanted to be very intentional what I was including in when I speak on the hot girl movement. One, to make it, um, you know, uh, easily understood,
Yeah, no,
and also relatable. But then also, like, this is it. It's simple. It's like, it's really not. It shouldn't be that deep. Or it shouldn't have to be that deep. It's deep,
it's
but it
deep.
should be simple.
And I do think it is relatable, right? Like the hot
Yeah.
girl movement. right?
Yeah,
That's such
yeah,
a catchphrase right now.
yeah.
You said something too, because you mentioned your work in AIDS and HIV education. I'm doing an episode on this later this season, but
Okay.
um, I think too, with your whole, talk about your body, your choice, your autonomy, right? I think I know I focus on pleasure a lot in my conversations on the podcast because it's just amazing to me. Women who are older than me, younger than me, who are still
Mhm,
saying, like, I don't know how to have an orgasm. I didn't own a
mhm,
vibrator, and that just blows my mind, right? And
mhm.
so to have it simplified, right? I think
Mhm.
um, focusing on the health side is just as important, right? To
Yes, yes.
know your body, know what is
Mhm,
pleasurable, but how do you keep yourself safe and how you protect yourself? And it is
yes.
really alarming when you read these statistics about Black women, still some of the fastest growing groups in new cases. Um,
Mhm.
yeah, it's tough, right? Like,
Yeah.
I think it's still a taboo topic in that regard
Mhm.
because people don't want to talk about the what ifs or the bad things that could happen if you're uneducated and not out here protecting yourself. So, um, I think it's great the work that you're doing, but I still feel like it's so much more to do.
No, definitely, because it takes, we need all of the above. There's so many real and deep conversations we can have, but we still are at the basics, body, the anatomy, a basic anatomy, understanding the body and how it works. And then also when it comes to with prevention, information around that, because like I mentioned earlier, we receive many of us receive some type of information, but it was in the delivery of where
Mhm.
it isn't well received, always, because it may come off as judgmental, it's limited, and it's only focusing on the negative,
Yeah.
or negative side or the consequences, whereas also in that conversation we could include pleasure, we could talk about the good, because especially when we talk about consent, um, having conversations around consent of if this was wanted or not, if a certain act, is wanted or not. How did you feel about this, or different things, but also having conversations of what feels good to you or what do
Yeah.
you actually want. So it's like if you're not sure, this could, I have the conversations around pleasure and consent together, because it's important to know what is it that you do like or do not like. What do you want and do not want, and do you feel comfortable advocating and speaking up for yourself? And so it's all important, and then also being informed, of the maybe not necessarily always the statistics, but just
Yeah.
knowing how you can, whatever it is that you want to um, prevent, or something that you want to happen. So preventing maybe STIs, and what you want to happen, maybe orgasm, so it's like it's different tools that you can receive, to prevent or encourage or assist, with both. And so we can have these conversations together. We not always,
But
often,
it is always separated, right?
often, yeah, often they are separate. And most of the time it's because one, they may not be informed fully of the other,
Mhm.
or comfortable talking about the other. And so that is something, different about, some of us, like including myself, of starting, many of us start in prevention, and some, stick to prevention, which is cool because it's needed. But then there are some of us who've added that healing or that pleasure piece, that sex positivity into the conversation, because we know that people are going to have sex. Sex is going to
Exactly.
happen
And they're never going to stop.
in all ages. And so what we are here to do, and was something that I would tell my students, the healthcare educator is like, we're not here to judge anybody or tell them what to do. We're here as a resource. We're just giving them the tools so they can make informed decisions, not about what's right, what's the wrong, the best or the worst. It's like, hey, if this is something that you don't want, or this is something you do want, or this is your goal, or this is not your goal, this is the information. And here we have some resources here for you.
And just off of that, like, I think too, like, we can't have the excuse anymore, like, I didn't know, right? Yes, there's misinformation out there these days, but everybody has one of these, right? That
Yeah.
has so much information at your fingertips. So you could find resources and information. I think sometimes it's the woeful ignorance about it as well. Like, I'd rather not know, but I just don't subscribe to that. Like, I'm the type of person, like, I want to know. I do my blood work a couple times a year, especially if you engage in some risky behavior. You should be doing it more frequently than and when I say risky, we all know right now, like, I can't remember what I was reading, but it was talking about how more frequently people are just having raw sex with multiple partners or unprotected sex with multiple partners without getting tested frequently, which kind of like made my head explode. And I think the one poll I read, like, they were questioning, and I think the one response I read, the one person was like, yeah, it was at least 8 partners that year unprotected, and they had only been tested once that year. And that just, stuff like that, when I read it, I'm just like, get your life together.
So
and that's saying that to me, not the person, but like, get your life together, right? Because you don't know, you have no idea what people could be hiding from you. You can only control yourself.
Which that is important about controlling yourself and being responsible for yourself. But also, yes, people can look up information. And but we also it's the stigma. One is the stigma around sex. This is what I'm saying. Like, we us still being stuck on the basics, so we can't even get to the deep nitty gritty when we talk about sex, because it's not just the physical. When we talk about sex, it's emotional, it's spiritual. We gotta talk about how past trauma can impact it, how we were raised, what did we see growing up, what environment we're in, how our money, situation impact. And, because sometimes there are there may be some acts or behaviors that may be risky, but it may contribute or help my financial situation, and so it's important. This is when I was speaking on of just being a resource, not telling people what to do, what's right, wrong, is, having a certain way of how you deliver information is important, with that non-judgmental piece. Because even if it's something that a person may not believe in or agree with or don't participate in themselves, there is a certain way that you can deliver the information, and it can still be personal in a way, but that open mind and non-judgmental piece is really important, especially when we talk about Black women, because we already experience so much shame and judgment restrictions around our bodies. And so a part of the movement, hot girl movement, and why I deliver it in the way that I do, one, is fun. So and it helps in the delivery. One, celebrate, because we already get so much critique about our bodies
everywhere.
And so I am not interested in participating in the critique and judgment, and restricting Black women, because that has been done. It's like
ad nauseum.
We've done that. We've experienced that. We do it to, it's done to each other. Not even just other people, but as Black women doing, judging each other. It's our partners restricting and judging us, and the harm that we experience. It's not others that we, when we having conversations, or maybe when we're talking about our lived experiences today, it is someone we know. It's somebody,
For sure.
who is close to us, a partner or an elder friend. And so something that is important, why I talk about like with twerking, and I incorporate my other practices into my work, is is really when we have to think about what is the ultimate goal, for us, and or an individual. And so the center of what I speak on is joy, is pleasure, and having to, can have the conversations and consider certain behaviors or acts, um,
Yes.
and how it can support these, or how is it not supporting my joy, my pleasure, and my safety. And and it's like,
Like
so
you got
that's,
that's the second one. My joy, my pleasure, my safety, my body, my
yeah.
choice, my pleasure.
Yeah, that is. I didn't
There
even
you
put that
go. There's
one
your next
there.
one.
Because that is. I talk about that often. In
Yeah.
serenity. Serenity is in there too. That's important.
Yeah. And the politics around women's bodies
Mm-hmm.
is frightening as well, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Especially as we watch these conversations with the government repealing
Mm-hmm.
things that were once legal, like
Yeah.
abortion, and in
Yeah.
some states, some of our red states, abortion is
Mm-hmm.
now. Oh, I was reading about Texas and how like some towns are trying to make it illegal for you to cross through to get to another state to get a safe abortion.
Mm-hmm.
Insanity.
Yeah.
And so it's just with doing all of this and being mindful of yourself, your pleasure, your choice, your safety, and then you have to worry about the politics around
Mm-hmm.
what you can do for your body and your health decisions too. It's a
Yeah.
lot.
It is. And
It's a
so
lot.
the body autonomy is it is pertaining to reproductive justice, and being
Mm.
able to make those decisions around our body, in that way. So I was watching, funny thing, random, is related though. I was watching an anime. It was an episode, but it was really deep. It was a quote, that government policies reflect our fears. You know,
Ooh,
yeah, that's deep. It's deep. And those, and it's like that's so real. Just thinking of how, policies that's put into place, policies, different laws that's being reversed. And it's like it is reflective of a fear. And there is a fear of women, or those with vulvas, or um of being able to decide if how they want to utilize or exist with their own bodies,
yeah,
especially as it pertains to when we, Black women, or women of color, or marginalized groups, is how historically our bodies have been used for the benefit, the profit, the pleasure for others. And so and now that we are speaking up and out about what we want to do, what we're not about to do, and if
yeah.
you're going to be here, what you got to do to it, for it,
Come on,
and
you
to keep
preaching now.
like, this is it. It's like, now I don't care, because we try in so many ways. We try to be respectable. So respectability politics of like, if I carry myself in this way, if I do this, if I wear this, I'm
and
good.
they
I'm safe.
still and it still don't
Harm,
mean shit, right?
judgment
Like,
can still happen. Harm can still happen. Restriction, all these different things can still happen. And so it's a collective. This is what the hot girl movement is like, a collective of Black women and others, and femmes, other like nine, um, just not even just. So when I talk about the hot girl, I'm talking about Black women and femmes, but just seeing how it is also noticeable in other groups as well of what's going
Yeah.
on. But when I talk about Black women and femmes with Hot Girl Movement, it's a collective decision to be like, to just like, I don't care. It's like unapologetically,
And how freeing that is to
celebrating
say,
themselves, their bodies, talk about they
yeah.
WAP and, and their thickness, the beautiful, just being just unapologetic and being free. And of course, it's going to upset, some people. It's going to make people uncomfortable. And typically, it's people who either have benefited from that oppression, the oppression of Black women, and those who have internalized that oppression and feel like this is something we still got to hold on to, that instead of like propriety of like of just being this, this respectable woman, and that's something that we have carried on because that was something we had to do to protect ourselves, for protection, while enslaved, and even after chattel slavery was
Abolished, yeah.
no longer legal. There were still other ways, we've seen this in other ways of how, especially when it comes to reproductive health, and even the history, the origins of gynecology at the expense of Black women's
Black women,
bodies,
yes.
enslaved Black women's bodies. I mean, and so it's so, people say what they're gonna say, but I will always stand with the Black women. I don't care whether they being called ratchet, the hoes, the sluts, whatever it is, I'm standing, I'm going to continue to stand because I am that girl. And, with my educated self or whatever, but I am
'Cause
multifaceted.
yeah, like
And,
it's duality there,
educated, it
right?
is, people need to feel like they had to choose, the professional self or the respectable self, or like this free, beautiful vixen or whatever it is. And but it's like I continue to stand. I continue to stand with the Megan Thee Stallions, the Cardi B's, Sexy Red, Suki, because they are speaking. They may say it in a way where people are not comfortable with some things that they're saying, and sometimes people don't even know because it's some things that they're saying. It's like, look, it's like, I know this may
They
sound
be hitting
crazy,
they be hitting it. Check.
but I was like, it's like, this is actually true. I was like, this is something that is actually happening and being desired, and actually some people enjoy, so it's like, again, coming back to joy and pleasure, what feels good. Just because you don't like it or you unfamiliar with it, that doesn't mean that I can't participate in it or that I shouldn't celebrate it, and so when you said something earlier about what did you say? It was basically about getting yourself together, focusing on yourself. Like that's really important in this work, of checking your own stuff, and checking your messages, because you could be participating in the oppression
And a lot
of
of times we do.
others.
A lot
Yeah.
of times we do, and we don't realize it, right?
Yeah.
Because I do sometimes, right? Like you just mentioned Suki and Sexy Red, and I see some of the commentary around both of them, right? And even though it's not something I would personally do, I think she should still have the freedom to do it, right? So, but I rock with it, right? Like that's
Yeah.
my whole spiel here is responsible and ratchet, because there's power and duality, and most people live their life straddling, that fence. I you said something too about and we gotta wrap up, but I love the whole spiel about like I'm gonna ride for Black women. I know we are our sister's keepers, right? Like, but we still can be harmful to each other as well. We can still be judgmental. And like I just said, I'm often guilty of it too. And I kind of try to check myself, or I'll make a little note, like, let me talk about this in therapy, because I'm sure something rooted there, and my therapist will dig. And sometimes it's nothing. Sometimes it is something a little deeper. But I do think as we are all, well, not everybody listens to Black women, but mostly Black women. But I do think just as much as we just be mindful to keep extending grace to your sister, right?
Yeah.
And to yourself, because
Yes, to
we beat
yourself,
ourselves up
for
just
sure.
as much. We're
For
always
sure.
our own worst critic.
That's yeah.
So I
That's
love
most
it.
important. I think that's
Yeah.
the most important of, showing, or giving yourself grace, in so many ways, because most of us were not given what we needed to
No.
really have, successful, healthy, positive, loving relationships with ourselves, let alone with others. And so we are trying to figure things out, and we think we have it, like one person or a group think like this is how you're supposed to do it. And everybody should do it this way. If you don't do it this way, you're
Then it's
wrong. And
like,
it's like,
yeah,
no, there are many ways to tap into that. And also, it can look different from the next person. And so that's something Audre Lorde speaks on, that of us celebrating the differences, not just, finding the ways. Yes, we have identities and experiences that bind us, connect us, but also we could celebrate those differences and still be like, hey, that ain't my thing. Do your thing. It's like, all right.
exactly.
And you don't deserve to be, harmed or, you know, um,
Ridicule. Yeah.
ridicule, yeah, all these different things, torn down, just because you're doing something that is different. Just think if nobody ever did anything different or that challenged the system, think of where we would be, we
A
would still
thousand
be,
percent.
we
A
would still
1000%.
be in chattel slavery, in the actual chattel slavery, and not in what it looks like today. But
Yeah. 1000%. So this is the perfect segue for us to wrap up our interview and move into what I call the breakdown. So
okay.
I'm going to say one word and you can
Okay.
respond with another word, a phrase, a sound,
Mm,
whatever first comes to mind.
okay.
All right. First one, Black women.
Yes.
Pleasure.
Mm, always.
Release.
That shit.
Twerking.
Is my therapy.
Joy.
Is a choice. It's a lifestyle.
Safety.
Shouldn't be conditional.
And last one, Adina Howard.
Freak like me.
All right, Dr. Francis, if you can tell everyone where they can find you on the internet, on social media, anything you want to plug, go, go, go.
Okay, cool. So I am Dr. Clarissa Francis, the real hot girl doc. And so you can find me primarily on Instagram, Facebook, the real hot girl doc, and website, drclarissafrancis.com, and my online store where you can have your own hot girl movement merch and a copy of my book, Freak Like Me, at therealhotgirl.com. And all of these, you're able to get to the online store, past recordings, interviews, writings, and other events, upcoming events, through any of those ways, from the website, Instagram is, in my bio, Facebook, and I typically keep it updated of what my upcoming events are. I am often speaking, either I'm speaking, vending, I offer consulting around Black sexual education, and so available to speak, available to offer workshop or training, and vending, and also assist and support in event planning around Black sexual liberation and pleasure and joy.
Awesome. Well, thank you again for joining us on this episode. It was great talking to you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
All right. That is it for this week's episode. I want to thank our guest, Dr. Clarissa Francis, the hot girl doc. Be sure to follow and support her endeavors. Also, be sure if you want to cop a We Vibe wand at a special discounted price, over $60 off, okay? Over $60 off for Boonie Breakdown listeners. Click the link in the show notes and on the booniebreakdown.com. Please, I appreciate you guys supporting the sponsors because it helps me out way more than you can imagine. It helps keep the lights on over here, right? And if you enjoyed this episode, I encourage you to listen, subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio, YouTube, or any apps you listen to your favorites on. Don't forget to leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. You might just hear one on the next episode. Follow us on all social media. Share the episode with those you love, those you don't love, those you fucking hate. I don't pay for these reels for nothing, okay? Have a dope ass week. Stay healthy, safe, and sane. Thank you for listening. And remember, the ratchet in me always honors the ratchet in you. Namaste. Until next time.